Hello, everybody, and welcome to Starting Small Music. I'm Justin McCormick, and you're about to hear a conversation with an artist, musician, and music industry professional on their journey and how they got to where they are today. At Starting Small, we like to take you on a journey uncovering the untold stories of your favorite songs and artists. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. How you doing today, Alex?
I'm doing good, Justin. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, man. So, getting right in your story, you were born in Rockville, Maryland. What was your childhood like?
Yeah. Um, Probably not too dissimilar from a lot of other people. The one key difference being my parents are not musical. But yeah, I grew up in right outside of DC. We're about 10 miles north of the city. So kind of an interesting place to grow up with all the politics and everything there. But strangely enough, neither one of my parents or anyone in my immediate family is in politics. We just happen to be growing up there, and great place to live. Enjoy visiting there. Still have family and everything like that back there. So it's a cool place.
Growing up on the East Coast, what was like the music scene like out there for you growing up?
Yeah, it was interesting. It's obviously very different from Nashville. I didn't know pretty much any country. There was a lot of blues and jazz, and honestly, a lot of punk rock roots there. So most of my time growing up and playing in school band and everything like that was geared towards kind of jazz band and everything like that. And then on the flip side, was like being in rock bands with my friends and acting like we were more hardcore than we probably were.
For sure. Now, before you even picked up an instrument, who were some of like the artists or albums that you were listening to that you kind of resonated with that made you want to get into music?
Man, I was all over the map. So again, neither one of my parents were musically trained. They were both fans of music, but they didn't play, and they couldn't be further from one another. I always joke that my dad would, in the car, we would listen to Rage Against the Machine and Motley Crue, and then in my mom's car, we would listen to Eva Cassidy and Mary Chapin Carpenter. So
Wide
I had
variety.
a pretty vast thing, and it was always my dad being like, "Hey, don't tell mom that we listened to Motley Crue on the way to school." And then I'd get picked up from her, and we'd be listening to the Godspell soundtrack on the way home. So pretty varied, and honestly, one of those things that probably in the long run helped me to be a musician today. Just having a wide net of all those different genres that I kind of grew up with.
For sure. Now, when was the first, what age were you when you first laid hands on the keys, or did your parents sign you up for lessons? Did you ask them to sign you up, or did you teach yourself?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'm sure if my mom ends up listening to this, she will be cracking up. My grandma and my brother, or sorry, my uncle, my mom's brother, they both were piano players. So I kind of was around it growing up. My grandma always had a piano at the house, and she would always play, and I would just kind of hop up and play along with her. And they noticed from a very early age that I was never like banging or anything like that. They claimed that I was like playing along musically, which I have some hesitations of whether or not that was actually the case. But shortly thereafter that, they put me in piano lessons because I was interested in it. And honestly, listening back to that David Dorn episode too, kind of hearing him where he was listening to something on the TV and then he'd go run to the piano and play it. I kind of have those experiences too. I play a lot from ear. So, I would listen to Jeopardy and be like, no, 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 like kind of figure everything out and have fun with it that way. And once that started to happen, my mom was like, all right, we need to get you into piano lessons. So I kind of had a little bit of an introduction before I actually had lessons, but when it started was probably 5 years old when I started to take lessons.
Wow. And then was it in high school you started playing in the rock bands you were talking about with your friends?
Yeah, it's funny. That's the one thing about piano is it's not exactly the coolest instrument in the bunch. So I actually started in fifth grade. It's kind of when school band started. I was like, well, there's no piano. I'm already doing that, and that's fine and well, but I want to do something else cool. So I started drums. So I played like traditional snare drum in elementary school band, and then continued that actually all the way up through high school, and ended up, picking up guitar, basically being like, okay, I can play piano a little bit. I know this knowledge, but I want to be cool and like impress girls and stuff. So decided that I probably needed to pick up a guitar and play some drums. So that's kind of how those things elevated for me on my musical journey outside of playing keyboards.
For sure. Now, coming out of high school, you chose to go to Berklee College of Music. A lot of
Yeah.
musicians in high school's dream. Did they come after you? Did you go out searching for how to audition? What was that process like?
Yeah, so the high school that I ended up going to, it's Blake High School in Silver Spring, Maryland. They have a fantastic music and arts program, and they had an incredible set of band directors that kind of helped me really realize my potential at that point, and honestly give me an opportunity to be a little bit outside of the box, not being just playing piano in the jazz band or playing drums in the marching band. They had a lot of opportunities outside of music. One that was very instrumental in kind of forming my idea of being a professional musician was having a little jazz quartet that I ended up building, and it was kind of school sponsored, but kind of not. It was kind of our own thing, and it was other classmates of mine, and we ended up playing uh, all these private gigs around the DC area. And that was kind of like, wow, this would be a really cool thing to do professionally. So with that kind of support system that high school provided for me, Berklee was definitely an option. It wasn't something that necessarily came to me, but it was always one of those things that was like, wow, I could do all these kind of cool things in a wide variety, outside of your classical music or whatever that most of your conservatories are. So I kind of knew from then that it was like, wow, Berklee would be a really great spot for me to end up.
Now, when you ended up at Berklee, was there anyone in your class that you kind of came up through with that is still doing music today too?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. There's so many people, even here in Nashville, that I work with on a day-to-day basis went to Berklee. Lots of engineers and other players, and even artists. Ingrid Andress was one. We weren't close at school, but we've ended up. I played on her record, and she's just crushing it right now. And she was maybe a grade or two below me at
Wow.
Berklee, and yeah, there's always a handful of people. It's funny, Berklee and Belmont too, a little bit. Everyone who kind of has that in their background doesn't necessarily wear it on their sleeve. It's kind of one of those things like, oh, I show up to the session and be like, oh, I went to Berklee College of Music. Like, let me show you how it's done. I feel like there's kind of that air to everything. So, it's funny. It's kind of like, oh, did you go to Berklee? Oh, you did? Yeah, I went to Berklee too. So it's one of those things. But yeah, there's definitely no shortage of talent on many different levels of the industry that went to Berklee. Some of which I've been friends with, and again, some we just kind of cross paths, and it's like, oh wow, we both made it here. So yeah, definitely a lot of that, which is probably the coolest thing about going to school. Obviously, I learned a ton there, but it's the people that I've met and been able to continue those relationships with that really have been invaluable to me.
Now, after graduating Berklee, you decided to make the move to Nashville. Why Nashville?
Mhm.
You're already on the East Coast. New York's right there. You could go to LA. What made you decide
Right.
Nashville?
Right. Yeah, that's one that probably my parents asked more than anything, and honestly, it comes back to summer 2009. I was a singing and dancing cowboy at Hershey Park in Pennsylvania. That's a rare thing that has been scrubbed from the internet, but a couple of my friends who I was in class with at Berklee, they got this summer gig down at Hershey, and it was like a really good gig just in the summer. It was pretty close to home for me. It was about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive. So I was like, well, that would be kind of cool, better than sitting at home doing nothing. So I ended up applying and getting a gig down there, playing with actually my college roommate in a band, and we did country covers. And that was really my first foray into learning about country and everything. Again, I had listened to some, like, again, growing up on Mary Chapin Carpenter, but country was definitely not a staple in my household. And it really just piqued my interest because I was like, man, there's so much good keyboard work on this. It really allows me to dig in and kind of play a lot of piano, play a lot of B3, and like be creative on that side of thing. So it really opened my eyes up in that perspective. And so yeah, from there it was like, well, maybe I should check out Nashville. And going back to Berkeley too, they actually have a yearly trip where they take a bunch of students down to Nashville, and they post up at Warner Brothers Music, and they kind of go around all the different studios, and they have lots of master classes and interviews and little experiences that you can do. So after my summer at Hershey, I did that the following spring, and I just fell in love with it down here. And actually ended up getting an internship down here the following summer. So after that, it was kind of like everything, all roads led to Nashville for me, at least in that point.
Yeah. Now, coming to Nashville, did you have in your mind that you wanted to do session work right away, where you wanted to go out on the road since you were fresh out of college? What was in your mind?
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing about kind of how I got to where I am. I planned it out completely differently. When I was at Berkeley, I was a music business major, and I had every intent of coming down here and working in the industry on that side of things. And again, I had mentioned I got an internship kind of off of that Nashville trip. So I spent summer 2010 interning here at Third Man Records, which is Jack White's record label.
Oh, wow.
Working for them, kind of, they don't necessarily have job titles over there. It's kind of everyone kind of pitches in and does everything together. So it was a great experience kind of working at a label and doing everything that they do. They also have ties with, pressing vinyl records. And that was really at the start of when vinyl started to make a comeback. So I was like, it would be great to do something like this, either working for a label. Unfortunately for me, there was not a position for me once I had graduated. But I actually came down and started working full-time as a booking agent, booking shows. And while I was doing that, I was playing with a great artist who I'd actually met up in Boston who lived down here. So I was doing some performing on the side as well. And that just kind of started to take off way more than the business side of things did for me. So I followed that and ended up touring for a number of years. I think I toured full time for about 7 or 8 years as a keyboard player. So it was a weird switch that just kind of ended up happening. And it was, at the time, it was a little bit of a crossroads, and it just seemed like most of my opportunities were coming from the music side. So the playing side, I should say. So I ended up doing that. And I guess the rest is history.
Now, when along that path do you end up meeting Brett Eldredge?
Yeah. So again, this dates back to my college roommate, Caleb Gilbreth is his name. We literally were placed together at Berkeley. He's from Texas. I did not know him at all, and just got an email one day saying, "Hey, your roommate is going to be Caleb. He's a drummer from Texas." And we kind of started this journey together musically, where we played on a bunch of stuff. So he was actually the one who played at Hershey Park, and I went down to visit him that summer, his first summer playing, and he was like, "You should try and see if you can play." So we ended up playing in that band. And then years down the road, we moved to Nashville, and he was playing in gigs and I was playing on gigs. It was always one of those things where we'd be like, keep pulling each other into these gigs that we were on. So like I would get one and be like, "Hey, you need a drummer? My buddy Caleb, like he'll come on," and vice versa. And he had been playing with Brett Eldredge for maybe about a year or two at that point. And they had a keyboard opening pop up. And fortunately for both of us, it was a lot of fun. I was able to get the gig, and we had a great time for a few years touring together with him.
I feel like that has to be so cool for you coming up with your roommate like that. I feel like you just had to have moments on stage where you look at each other and be like, is this even real? Like we're here like doing it in amphitheaters right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was incredible. It's one of those things where you obviously get to spend so much time together when you're on the road. And it was nice to kind of have, one of my longtime buddies there alongside with me and getting to share all those fun things with him. And two, just having somebody out there to, do all sorts of stuff with. I remember going on all sorts of excursions. We both love the outdoors and stuff like that. So if we'd be out on the West Coast, we'd find like a really good hike to go on and everything like that. So great musical experiences, great life experiences, and ones that I'm so happy that I got to share with him for sure.
Now, when did you make the decision to kind of take some time off the road and maybe focus more on your session work?
Yeah, so that was one that kind of started near the end of my time with Brett. It's funny, I had started to play kind of remotely, where people were sending me tracks and they would ask me to play on songs. And it got to the point where I remember some days, being on the bus out on tour, and someone would send me a song and be like, "Hey, I'm playing this song. I just wrote this song with Florida Georgia Line. Can you play keys on it? Like, I'd love to amp it up a little bit." And I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, my keyboards are currently on the truck that's coming in. It'll be here in 2 hours. And, they're going to take my keyboard and set it up on stage before the gig here, but I guess I could pull it off, and I'll set up my Nord in the back of the lounge in the bus and shut the door and hope that there's enough bus Wi-Fi that I can upload WAV files." So kind of my last year of touring, I kept thinking, like, man, this is getting pretty difficult. Like, there seems to be more and more of these songs, and I'm trying to get them all done. But honestly, it was a blessing in disguise for me. But it was decided for me that Brett ended up going in a different direction, and that kind of left me with a choice of whether or not I wanted to keep on touring with another act, or kind of working my way to studio work. And ultimately decided, like, hey, I'm married. I figured that we'll probably have kids down the road. If there's any time to do it, it's probably now. So again, kind of a blessing in disguise that my touring career ended the way it did, but it all worked out, and no bad blood between anybody or anything like that. Just kind of the way it goes sometimes on the road. So yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I am.
Now, fast forward to now, you're one of the most in-demand session keyboardists in Nashville. What's something that you've kind of learned, like, as you've had more and more time, like, in the studio?
Yeah. Well, first off, I don't know if I would put myself in such high regard. Again, David Dorn is definitely one of those guys. Dave Cohen is one of those guys. And honestly, I've had so much just cheerleading from them for me. It's one of those things where the session community is so small. There's not a lot of us. And from the get-go, I remember being like, hey, I'm off the road. Hitting those guys up and being like, I don't know what advice you can give to me. Like, I've been doing a little bit of this. I'd love to get into doing more sessions. And they've just been awesome. So honestly, it's listening. It's hearing from these people that have been here before, whether it's kind of this new class of session musicians, or even the ones who, have played on hundreds upon hundreds of hits, and just listening, seeing what they have to say, seeing what their opinion is, seeing what's helped them, what's hurt them, really just honing in on what they can offer. And, it's different for everybody. I look at kind of my path here. I mean, you can hear just from going over it, it's like I've been up, down, sideways. I never thought that it would lead to this point, but sometimes you just have to find your lane and stick to it, and just hope that it gets you where you're looking to go. And fortunately for me, I've been able to do that. But yeah, I would say, again, I can't say enough about those guys who have kind of paved the way for me as like a modern keyboard player or whatever. But they're just the nicest people, and they've been incredible mentors for me, and I'm lucky to call them friends now. So that's probably been one of the biggest things that I can point to and say, hearing from those guys who have been there before and continue to do this at such an incredibly high level, it's just an inspiration and a huge help.
For sure. One of my favorite projects that you've played on is Drunk Me. That whole Mitchell Tempany
Yeah.
EP has such cool synths and keyboards, and I'm sure you feel
Yeah.
the same way. What do you remember about the time cutting that record?
Yeah. Mitchell is just a huge, incredible artist, just a huge inspiration, honestly. I love everything that he does. And he's one of the first people that I actually got to play on their records. Jordan Schmidt produced pretty much everything that Mitchell has ever done. And I remember doing my first real record was with Jordan over on the East Side, and we were recording that Linden Avenue EP that he put out that had some of the songs, and we ended up recording Drunk Me for that. And then, he got picked up by Sony and all that kind of got upgraded and everything. And that was really my first experience with being on a big record. Drunk Me was my first number one that I got to play on. And it was Jordan's first number one as a producer and Mitchell's first number one as an artist. So I'm grateful to be in that little trio with them. And, we've been working hard on music all this year. Mitchell's got a great album coming out here in the next little bit. So I think I've played on just about everything that Mitchell's released, which is incredible. I'm so pumped to be a part of it. And he's just an incredible artist, as you know, great writer, amazing voice, and somebody I'm just always indebted to because, again, my first number one, and just somebody I'm always happy when the phone rings and it's him if they're looking for keyboards. So loved getting to play all that stuff. Again, that early stuff is so fun. I still say Truck I Drove is one of my favorite songs that I've probably recorded on.
That's so
it's
funny.
Just so funny.
Truck I Drove is my favorite one off that album, and I still blast that one in my car. I think that should have been a single.
I know, it just feels so good. You can't help but smile. The lyrics are just so funny, and it's just so relatable. I never had a truck, and it feels like I did when I listened to that song. But if everything had gone differently, maybe that one would have got a chance at a single. Who knows? Maybe there's still time for it to be. But all that being said, Mitch is just an incredible guy, a great artist. He's been incredibly kind to me, and I'm so excited for you guys to hear what he has up his sleeve, because it's been a lot of fun working on all the music that we have for him over the course of these last couple of years.
Now, you also make house music that you release yourself, right?
Yeah, a little bit. From time to time, I kind of dabble in that world. It's funny. I'm kind of known as like the guy with the synths, but I've always loved EDM and everything like that. But I do a little bit of that, but there is like a few guys named Alex Wright on there who are releasing house music, so I think you might be seeing some of that. I do dabble a little bit in that world, but I think the ones that are like on iTunes or on Spotify that are under Alex Wright are not me. It's guy with my name, like in Scandinavia, who's crushing it.
Hey, well, at least it's not bad. At least it's not terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, but there was a time there where I was like, again, kind of always dabbling in a little bit of everything. So like trying out weird EDM projects and stuff. But again, those weren't under my name. So if you're finding those that are under my name, I think it's some guy in Europe who's crushing it over there.
Now, as someone who is hearing the music that's not out right now, but maybe like coming out in the 6 to next 1 year on the radio, where do you see country music headed?
That's a great question, and one that's changing by the day. Even as I know, what's coming down the line for these artists that I've played on that have records coming out. I think it's always changing, and streaming has really changed how music is consumed and what those kind of guidelines are in terms of what you can do. So really, it's so artist dependent. I know people who are trying to push the boundaries with sounds and how pop leaning it is. And then on the opposite of that, there's people who are saying, hey, let's make this as 90s country as possible, or let's make this as traditional as possible. And I think both are awesome and needed, and there's an audience for both. So I personally love that there's all those variables in play at any given time. You might wake up and have a session on the books for an artist, and you might say, oh, I know how this is going to be, or I think I know how this is going to sound. And then you walk in and they say, all right, guys, we're actually going to do something completely different. Like, are you down? And it's like, yeah, I'm down. Let's do it. Like, that sounds awesome. So that makes my kind of day in and day out a lot of fun. Is, I don't think everyone is heading in the same direction. I don't think anyone's heading in a wrong direction. The fact that it's multiple directions and everyone is kind of doing their own thing and chasing, their true artistry. That's what I'm here for. That's what music should be. So, is country music heading in a specific direction? I don't know if I could say one way or another, but I like where it's going. It's going a lot of places. So.
For sure. Now, I like to close all my interviews by asking my guests a piece of advice you've learned along your journey. And I mean, you've lived so many different lives throughout your musical journey.
Yeah,
What's one piece of advice you would give to other musicians out there?
man, that's such a great question. And two, I think I kind of talked about it, talking about my peers that I work with. You know, listen to other people who have been around you. If you're in a session, listen to what they're playing. There's so much to be learned and so much to be inspired by all the talent that there is in this city and other music cities across the globe. It just it always makes music better when everyone's listening to each other, and that's just been a huge thing for me, is feeding off of everyone else. And the other thing too that I always talk about, just because I've ended up doing so many different things, is just, kind of follow your heart. And I know that sounds so trite to say, oh, follow your heart, but you know, figure out what it is that you love, figure it as what that fills your cup up, that makes you want to get up in the morning and do, and go after it, man. It's one of those things where, if you just be true to who you are and do what you want to do, you're going to find success in it more likely than not, and you're going to have a fun time doing it. So that's probably the best advice that I can give. It's just find what you want to do, find your own voice, and go after it.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment, and check out my music on all streaming platforms at Justin McCormick. See you guys next time.